Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Get Jasched. I am your host, Jess Jash. Today I want to dive into when workshops are and are not useful for you in your business. And I'm talking about workshops. You could probably apply this broadly, but obviously, I'm going to be talking about workshops around well-being and all of the different facets of well-being because I have been around these parts for a minute now. I've been around, we've been doing this for 10 years. And in that 10 years, I have done many a workshop, and I love workshops. I think they're really great ways to achieve certain objectives. And at the same time, I've also seen workplaces perhaps rely on workshops to do the work that they were never designed to do, that to do work that they just don't have the scope to cover. And it's hard, when you invest into a thing that you think is going to be the solution, like a workshop that you think is going to be the solution, and it doesn't provide the exact outcome that you want. Sometimes having this knowledge that we're about to dive into can be helpful in terms of understanding what it is that you're looking for, and then fitting the solution, or finding rather the solution that fits what you're actually wanting the outcome to be, rather than putting it all on one particular thing and then kind of just feeling like it was maybe a waste of money or time, or throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and thinking that none of this around well-being is worth anything. So we're going to demystify that a little bit today, and I feel more and more passionate about this particular topic because I am the facilitator in a lot of these scenarios where, as the facilitator, any good facilitator is going to want to provide you with the outcome that you want, but it's hard to do, or not going to be possible to do, if that they haven't been given scope to. So we're going to dive in because we're definitely not hating workshops in this conversation either. We love workshops, but sometimes they just don't fit. So we are going to dive into what workshops, when you might choose a workshop as your solution or as your next step, and then when you might have to choose something else. So workshops themselves, I come prepared because I've been trying to record this episode all damn day. So I'm so glad we're here doing it. But workshops are really, really great for when your goal is any one of these things. It could be multiple of these things, but any one of these things. When your goal is to just build awareness within the team in particular, when you want to build awareness and bring a conversation around a particular thing, workshops are great for that. They are great for introducing new concepts, regardless of whether it is a new concept on a personal level for everyone involved, but new concepts into the business itself. Really great for that. They are really useful to some degree in creating a shared language. Workshops, depending on the length of time, and this is slight, not a question mark, but a slight sort of caveat to it, depending on the length of time and depending on how it is run, as long as it's literally workshoppy rather than just a 3-hour lecture as such. But they are really great at creating that shared language that helps people, your team, the people within your team, to develop meaning in that language. So develop understanding of the semantics of different things, of like, okay, well, like when we say this, now we understand because we've learned that from the workshop, all of that, right? So that is a very, very baseline of that. I'll go into how that can come out in other ways, but it can help with the baseline. It can help with starting conversations, absolutely. um, it's, if you want to be starting conversations about a particular area, this is great for that. And it can help with, providing a little bit of inspiration or motivation or a way forward for people if they've been in a workshop around a particular area. And again, we're going to talk about well-being with that because that's what we do. Well, that's what I do here. But if you're wanting to inspire people with some information and education around finding ways forward, maybe for themselves, that can be a really, really good way to start that, to approach it. And then with that, it can also give practical tools that people can immediately try and engage in. All of these things are really, really useful things, as you can imagine, on a personal level, but also within a team. So, examples of workshops I've held or that could be done in the area of well-being, there's emotional intelligence, there is stress management, there is mindfulness of all sorts. I was going to say I've done it all. I probably haven't done it all, but who knows what it all is. But with mindfulness, I've done the yoga workshops internally within teams too. I've done the yoga workshops, I've done the meditation, I've done the stress management lunch and learns for a 6 to 12 month period of time every week, or whatever the frequency was, around stress management and a different layer of it. Which again can be really, really useful, but we're going to get into where it stops being useful and where it starts being a bit of a band-aid solution, when it just remains at that point. There are workshops I have done around communication and having uncomfortable conversations and boundaries. A few years ago, several years ago now. What is time? Several years ago, I did Boundaries 101 and then Boundaries 102 just as a follow-up to that. And that was a really great workshop to dive into around just even learning what boundaries are. Obviously, it doesn't do the continued work because it doesn't have scope to, but it allows for that diving in. Workshops around strengths, finding personal strengths and exploring that at a very initial level. Psychological safety is something that I provide through some of my fractional chief wellbeing officer work with clients, where I'm going in and consulting, but we have workshops within that, and it's around psychological safety. So with that one in particular, it can, at the workshop level, it can only really remain an idea and a concept and education or information. It doesn't provide a solution, especially with that one, because psychological safety is so nuanced. And I have partners I bring in with that topic in particular, because it's important to get it right. So those are examples of workshops that are sort of in my realm, at least, that I've held, that I do, that have worked, and they've largely had really positive feedback, in the sense of people, the feedback will be like, oh, I didn't think about that, and oh, I feel so understood or seen or heard or whatever it is, right? Like, so people leave feeling validated, but then also leave feeling a little bit excited because they've been shown a next step, or they found a next step in that for them. So workshops are really, really great if you are looking to just help people find more of that initial information and understanding and bring in a conversation. And from that point, from that point. Workshops can only be so effective to a certain point, because workshops can do all of these things and provide an idea and information and things like that. But what workshops can't do is systems change or improvement or optimization. They don't change the system, they just give you information, but they don't necessarily give you an exact way of how to change the system, because that is beyond its scope. They can't change the workload, they can't change the scheduling, they can't change the leadership behaviour. And this is something that I see a lot, actually. I've seen a lot. I don't see a lot these days. Let me rephrase that. I've seen a lot. And that is where leaders, business owners, whoever, whatever they are at the leadership level, feel like they're doing a really good thing. They want to do this thing for their team, which is very, very, I was going to say noble, but it's more than just noble. It's very, very good. It's good to want to do these things for your team and to provide resources for your team. Highly support that. Highly recommend it. Absolutely. And a workshop for your team doesn't develop leaders, unless the leaders are in that workshop. But again, it can only go so far. So it doesn't necessarily change leadership behavior, certainly doesn't change policies or procedures or incentives, things like that. Workshops don't change team dynamics. They might improve interpersonal relationships between those individuals involved in the workshop, who are in the same workshop, whether they are in the same team or department or not. But they can improve interpersonal dynamics in that way, but they can't improve team dynamics out of nowhere. Especially when you're not looking at systems and things like that are involved, or scheduling. Scheduling is a big thing too. And along with that, is workshops can't change organisational habits. Because the reason that is, as much as you may want that to be the solution, the reason that they can't change those things is because the facilitator is not scoped to do that work. As a facilitator for a workshop, my scope is to come in and take the information that I can get prior to in the preparation of the workshop, and then come in and deliver the workshop and hold the space and work with the people involved in the workshop, because it is interactive, it is dynamic. It's not just me standing up the front like a lecturer talking at people. It is very much, let's talk through these things in relation to your specific scenario, yes, but all of those things that a workshop can't do, all of those things exist after I leave. And it's not about saying you should employ me. It's not, employment is not the solution either. It is just all of those things are still going to exist, and there's also going to be people who aren't in the workshop. But systemically, if we look at systems change or systemic approaches to well-being, that is going to be there, and a workshop can't touch that in a way that is meaningful enough, because you've got to consider workplace culture. These little things can help, but the way I see it is sometimes, the way I see it is because I have seen it happen in this way. It's not out of nowhere, but sometimes the workshop might be put on over here because there's a fire burning, a metaphorical fire, right? Workshop is like, oh, let's try and tame this fire. So the workshop is put on over here as like a band-aid to the fire. I know that doesn't work, but we're going with it. And people come to the workshop and they might feel a bit of relief. They might feel a bit of, oh, okay, a bit of hope. That's not a bad thing either, right? But if the fuel source for the fire is actually over here and fueling something over here, then doing something with the band-aid, with the workshop over here, isn't going to actually address the fuel source that keeps that fire raging. If you are watching on YouTube, you would have just seen the lovely hand gestures I was making to demonstrate that. But hopefully, if you are listening, you could grasp where I was getting with that. Basically, you have to address the fuel source of the fire, not just the flames themselves, because the flames can show up elsewhere. If the fuel source is, if that gas leak is still going and still leaking, then you're fucked if you don't address it, to put it politely. And sometimes workshops are approached as the solution rather than a tool, but this is where we really need to, make sure that we are being aware of what is the outcome you are wanting, what are you wanting to address, and then finding the solution that fits those things. Because that underlying environment is always going to remain the same. The culture is going to remain the same. It's like death by a thousand cuts. The culture is built or broken by a thousand tiny interactions that happen outside of the workshop. And workshops are also those things where it's a shame that this is the case, but they are also those things where people may feel genuinely enthusiastic or excited or motivated or hopeful and wanting change and willing to change and all of that. And yes, there's personal things in particular that people can take on and go, oh, I really learnt that. That's great. But there is also like a half-life for that enthusiasm once people get back into their usual working environments, their normal work day, and then they just feel overwhelmed. Then they just feel like they're dealing with the same drudgery, the same old shit, right? Because the system is not being addressed. So workshops are great for introducing a concept. They are great for getting a feel for a facilitator, for sure. Like if for example, if you are still unsure of the uptake of my work with your team, or if you're unsure of how the team is going to respond to a concept, it's understandable to want to just start with a bit of a workshop just to introduce the facilitator, or the team rather, to the facilitator, or introduce the facilitator to the team, and get a gauge on how they're responding, so then you can really see if you feel like it's going to be worth more of that systemic investment. However, that is the risk, in that you won't get that full result until, if that's what you're looking for. So that's the two differences between workshops and what you'd use a workshop for, and when you shouldn't, if you're needing to do something a little bit more with it. So with that, how do you know what you need? Because I've kind of addressed some of it, but you need to really ask you need to ask the right questions. You need to ask yourself the right questions. And any service delivery provider like me, we should be asking you these questions to help you find that answer, to then provide you with that solution. That's why with my solutions, I have the certain, like, the frameworks and the pathways, but I will never just be like, you need this, without actually getting to have the conversation. And that's why that's where the tailoring happens. Not that it's changed completely. The same offerings are still available, but what is offered and why it is offered is very unique to what conversation we have had about that, in where I've been invited to then offer a potential solution. So how do you know which you need? Workshop or not workshop? Really, it's, are you trying to increase personal capability? Because I will say the second option to not workshops is still going to do that for you anyway. But to distill it down, are you trying to just give people a tool or a training or a capability as a skill, as a once-off concept, or are you trying to solve a business problem? It's okay. Either, whatever your answer is, it's okay. Whatever your answer is has to be the truth, and that's what makes it okay. Because if you're trying to, in the context of increasing capability, to explain what I mean, is if you're just trying to introduce, and it still comes down to just introducing a concept, because you can't really dive all that deep into it beyond a workshop, but if you only have a workshop, but if you're trying to introduce a concept, you could be introducing the concept of mindfulness, introducing the concept of how to improve communication, ideas, ways, like it's almost like a long form brainstorming, but it's still contained. Introducing the concept of emotional intelligence and educating about what that is, starting to develop leadership skills. And I say start because leadership skills and development takes time and consistency and repetition. So it's, if you're trying to introduce these capabilities or these concepts that can help people, if you're finding that they're stressed and that they can be helped by, well, have you considered mindfulness? Here's how you can do that. Then workshops can be a good introduction. But they are only ever going to be an introduction. So if you are trying to solve problems like burnout or high turnover or absenteeism or poor engagement within the team or poor interaction within the team, conflict, low trust, shitty collaboration, and by shitty, I mean, departments operating in silos when they need to be working together with their strengths, then a workshop is only going to be one piece of that much bigger solution. And that's why I say, workshops are the introductory, and they are going to be involved in a bigger solution if those are the things that you're looking to solve. But workshops on their own are not going to solve things like the burnout, the high turnover, the absenteeism, the interpersonal issues within the business as a whole, the whether that's conflict or just silos, right? So if those are the things that you are looking at solving, that's when you need to start to consider what is a more effective, comprehensive option and solution that actually targets and addresses the right thing. So when you are considering which one or the other, and I understand budget plays a big role in why people focus on workshops to begin with, they're like, but this might be nice to do. Okay, let's do that. But sometimes if you're really serious, I think I want to say this, let me say it, and if I need to correct myself, you're going to watch me do it in real time. But if you're really serious about actually implementing this into the culture, sometimes you need to look beyond the budget and make it part of your plan. Yeah. And I think I'm happy with that. But I think also that's not to say people who don't have the budget aren't serious either. I do want to acknowledge that. But if you're really in a position where that is what you need to focus on, instead of sort of going, all right, well, what workshops can we put on that's going to be a low cost? Because it's not always going to be a low cost. It may feel like a low cost because it won't be as much of an investment, for example, as the more comprehensive solution, but it's not always the lowest cost if you look at what the actual effectiveness is you want and what the outcome is that you want, and what is the lost costs. What is the cost of not addressing the thing sooner? Sunk cost. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. What is the sunk cost of not addressing the thing sooner because you're just trying to throw little solutions at it? That's what I mean by that, by looking at it seriously and get serious about it. So again, you need to look at, what are we actually trying to improve? Are we trying to just offer this thing as an additional skill that people get to learn because they work here? Like, kind of, it's not a perk, but kind of like a perk, like a, we're doing this for you, not to solve a problem, but to just give you something extra. Workshop, great. Or what are you trying to solve? Something like leadership capability, systems, processes, workloads, scheduling, which is included in processes, I'd say. Communication, also included in scheduling. Decision making, team norms, all of these can kind of cross over. How do you measure things? What is accountability? Things like that, because you need to consider, if you're trying to solve those problems, those are the areas where more sustainable change happens with more longevity than just a once-off workshop. Workshops will be a part of that solution, but they are part of a larger strategy towards your solution. It's part of a broader strategy towards your solution, rather than just we did this stress management workshop once. And you've got to consider too, workshops in general are going to, if they are broad and they've been scoped to be broad, like, can you deliver a stress management workshop for my team? Great. Without the opportunity to dive into and explore where the team is at, which is not always part of the scope of the workshop, then the workshop is going to be delivered to the lowest possible denominator in terms of people's comprehension or existing understanding of stress management. So you might feel that you're going over things that you're already aware of because you're catering to people who may not be aware of it as well. So that's going to feel like a sunk cost sometimes too, if it doesn't go into things, but that is also what you've potentially asked for, when what you really want to do is look at the system. So I've mentioned scheduling a fair bit, and that's just because it's an example I always think of with a client that I've worked with in the past, where they were showing up to these stress management info sessions, which were like lunch and learns, not full-on workshops, but lunch and learns, and they were always coming back with the people attending always had the same complaint of what was stressing them out the most, and it was that their calendar had been scheduled with basically and literally back-to-back meetings. Like, there was no room for breathing, for bathroom breaks, for just to transition. It was literally, sometimes they'd cross over in the calendar in the time, but let's say it was literally like this until 2 p.m. and then the next meeting starts at 2 p.m. and you have to be on early, and that would be scheduled all day. And people were feeling stressed and overwhelmed because they were in meetings so much they weren't able to actually sit and do their work. And then they were coming to these sessions with me to learn how to de-stress, but that's an example of where the fuel for the fire is certainly coming from somewhere else, that in that context I wasn't scoped to address as much as I wanted to, as much as I would have been able to, as much as that could have been something that would have been most useful. It was, I wasn't able to address it. So yes, people were learning these skills, but those reasons for stress weren't on them to mindful their way out of, because you've got to look at system and strategy as part of that, in the workplace especially. So really consider what problem you are trying to solve. I love facilitating workshops. I think they're really fun to do. They are really fun to introduce, something that I know so well already and play with how I introduce that each time with each workshop, like as it evolves, as I evolve, all of that. I think they're incredibly valuable in what they are for, but I am just really aware that sometimes we want to solve a problem, and what we think will solve the problem isn't actually going to do that. So if the goal is education, awareness, inspiration, then workshops are a great investment, a great starting place. And then you can go from there if you want to. You might get feedback and have people go, well, actually I found that really useful. I think we could use that here, and then maybe it develops. Absolutely. Maybe it doesn't. That's cool too, right? But if that's what your goal is to start with, great. If your goal is to transform culture, to improve systems, processes, improve how things are done from a strategy perspective, not necessarily from an operations perspective. They can be, in my context, they can be advising done, but improve how things are done from a strategy perspective, then you're going to be asking too much of the workshop when that work belongs to leadership development and systems primarily, in order to see lasting change, in order to actually be able to dive into the weeds. That's sort of where you need to consider the difference. So I hope this has been useful. I know it's not a straight answer, and it never is. And sometimes, yes, you do have to just start with a workshop because maybe that's where you know where to start with, or maybe that's what your budget allows, and you can just take whatever it is. It's totally understandable, but I want you to be making the right decision if you are going to invest any of your precious time, energy, money. It's the end of the day. It's been a day. So time, energy, money, your precious time, energy, and money. If you're going to be investing that into something for your business, that's a great start that you actually are going to, like, in support of your business, absolutely. But I understand what it's like to think you're going to be getting something, and that's where you've got to have the real conversations, whether it is with me or a different facilitator, different topic, whatever it is. You've got to actually have the real conversations about what it is that you want, rather than be like, well, that's good enough, unless it truly is, unless it matches what it is that you actually want. And I know it's also maybe not scary, but frustrating sometimes to have those conversations, because then you feel like maybe you're being sold to. But again, all I can say is you've just got to trust your gut based on whether you trust the person who is sharing that information with you in the first place enough to see the vision. So I hope this has been helpful in helping you figure out solutions that work best for you, because I know that, especially in the area of well-being, it can feel like a leap of faith sometimes, because it's not as understood as much as the need for accounting is, for example. Yeah, and yet it can do so much to support your business. But I just want to make sure that, regardless of whether it is workshops or not around well-being, or a totally different topic, that you are genuinely just being realistic with what you expect it to change. And sometimes that requires you actually being willing to look at what the problem really might be, and that whether it's a problem or a challenge, right? And that it might be something that is within the business, which doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong, but it could mean that there could be a more useful way forward for you. So enjoy enjoy your week. I hope this is useful. Please reach out if you have any questions. Obviously, if you want to talk about workshops or the more systemic solutions and options, and just actually explore without feeling pressured. Obviously, it's to actually just explore what might be most useful given where you're at. That's what the conversation is for too. So that's what I have my free consults for, is really just to get an understanding and then help you see which solution might be best for that. And like I said, I've been doing this for 10 years and I've got the corporate experience in amongst that, and then prior to that where I've also been doing this. So it's a long time passion. With that, I normally do this at the beginning, but I totally blanked. So thank you for listening if you have listened. But a reminder also, my book, Leaders Who Thrive, is coming out in September. You can add it to your wish list now on Routledge, Booktopia, and Amazon. If you head to the link in the caption or the show notes, it'll take you to those options. It'll take you to all three, and you can pick which option works for you. It's very exciting that book is coming out. It is a mindful antidote to disconnected teams, and it will help you just explore some of these concepts for yourself so you can really sort of lead how you want to, but support your team as well as supporting yourself. You can also subscribe to the Get Jasched Meditation Plus library. It is attached to this podcast. This podcast is free, but the library is a monthly subscription of $7 a month, and you get weekly guided meditation and mindfulness practices, and they are between relaxation meditations and focused meditation mindfulness, and they're designed to just support you, give you different tools that you could use, and they're worded in a way that is accessible, especially to people who are very much in their heads and in their sort of cognitive cerebral brains for most of the day. So you can access that, and as soon as you subscribe, you get access to the whole library, just like you would any podcast, but you get access to the whole library for as long as you have your subscription. So that is there too. And for the moment, I have a special mid-year offer open. So there are two elements. One is the mid-year leadership reset, which is 3 one-on-one coaching sessions for wellbeing and leadership, as well as 12 weeks. And this is over 12 weeks access to the personalized health platform. So you have your unique insights into your own needs and then support along with that. So that's the mid-year leadership reset. You can also get a custom personalized meditation recording from me by filling out a form. And once you've filled that out and obviously paid, then I will provide that to you within 7 days. So those are two separate things, and then you can bundle them together. I will include the links below as well. So the links to all of these things will be below, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew about that, because the mid-year leadership reset won't be around forever because it's for mid-year. And I'm not sure how long the personalized meditations will be around for. They might be around for a while, but if you are just wanting something that is very specific to you, the form just asks you questions to learn for me to understand where you're at. I do not use AI for any of it. I am not comfortable with how generative AI has stolen the work of artists and creators. So I do not use AI. I also don't put client information into AI in order to create it. I look at it, I find the patterns and fit all the pieces together, and then I record it myself for you. So that is available too. And then you can, the bundle is the leadership reset, the 3 sessions, 12 weeks access, as well as the recorded meditation if you would just like all of that. In any case, that being said, enjoy. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know how you liked this episode. If you found it useful, please share it. Leave a happy review if you find it useful. All of those things help it find more people, but also help more people benefit from that usefulness too. So until next time.